All right, Ike. So I don't know if you've seen the news this week, but Land Rover is willing to send a new Land Rover owner into space, near space, but like Richard Branson space. So I think that's kind of the better space than Jeff Bezos space, just not quite as good as Elon Musk space. But anyways, they're willing to send you to Richard Branson space. And like Richard Branson, I believe you have to be nude underneath the jumpsuit, like Sir Richard Branson was, of course, for his flight. And
I'm nude under my clothes right now.
Yeah, that's perfect. Oh, yes, you're ready to go. You're ready to go.
I'm ready.
They are willing to send a new Land Rover owner. You get 100 entries. If you've ordered a new Land Rover, you get 50 entries. And every Land Rover owner gets 1 entry if you want to go and fill out the paperwork. So, Ike, that means you could have 500 entries. I think you would win. Yeah, you're going to win. You're going to be on the same level. Oh, man, wouldn't Land Rover be pissed off? The person that won this, I'm sure, very expensive trip to space with Richard Branson was like, I've got Disco 1 from 1992.
Freelander.
Oh, a Freelander guy. I think that would be celebrated the world over.
Now you then have the option to buy an Astronaut Edition Range Rover, right?
That's true. And I think you're somewhat obligated to.
You're obligated.
I mean, they sent you to space for free. That's not cheap. The least you can do.
They have to recoup some of their money.
Yeah, you got to get them. You got to get one of those. Now, they won't be able to deliver it because there's no chips for it, but eventually you'll get the Astronaut Edition Range Rover. So
I feel like they posted a reasonably substantial quarterly loss last quarter. I wonder if that has anything to do with buying space shuttle trips.
Yeah, it's because of all the spaceship trips for Series 2A owners that accidentally win. I like that, though. They're trying to stack the odds towards new Land Rover owners. But if it is a truly random drawing, yes, that does skew the odds. But it still opens the door to some guy with a Freelander getting sent into space. What a story that would be.
That'd be pretty great. Well, we'll have to enter.
Yeah, I think we should each enter several times and just see, and we'll do the first podcast from near space. Yeah, it'll be great. I think it's gonna be really interesting. In other news, though, and this is probably some of the most delightful news that I have heard in some time, and I know this is something that you're a big fan of. I know that
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah,
and I'm so excited about it. It is Kawasaki's new rideable electric goat.
It is literally a rideable electric goat, an EV goat. When some manufacturers are going to, obviously electric is the future. You want electric snowmobiles. I just saw a great electric snowmobile, electric side-by-sides. There's electric boats, of course, electric cars. Kawasaki said, you know what? We're going to go in a direction that you're not expecting. The electric goat market. And I'll tell you what, they've cornered the market on electric goats.
To be fair, it does kind of resemble a goat and an ibex and like maybe a llama.
A little llama. I thought the neck is a little bit elongated. I imagine, to fit in batteries or I don't know exactly.
It's pretty great.
It's great.
In terms of off-road vehicles, this might be my favorite. I would sell all my Land Rovers for
you'd think it ought to be like a pretty decent. It's the Rokon of like EV goats, it's just there's no terrain.
If you've ever seen the Boston Dynamic dog videos, those things are pretty capable, pretty incredible, in terms of their balance and capabilities. And I'm sure if you've seen those, you've probably thought, man, I wish they made a bigger one you could ride on. Yeah. And that's kind of what Kawasaki's done. They've made this giant robot and
then the natural conclusion of that is like, well, if I could ride on any electric animal, naturally it would be a goat.
I mean, that may say something about your Canadian heritage, but
I think so. Yep. Goat riding. Wild goat riding. That's it's a big pastime.
Well, the handlebars are built into this particular goat, which I'm sure some of our more rural listeners will appreciate.
Yeah.
A goat with handlebars.
What's the range on that goat? Like, what do you get?
It doesn't say what the range is of the goat or the top speed of the goat.
Yeah.
But honestly, I don't think it would matter.
I don't care either way. Yeah, it doesn't. It really doesn't matter. Like, and as I've said many times over the past couple months here, I am actively looking for a vehicle that will carry me the 3 blocks to Starbucks from my workshop. And man, EV Goat has quickly jumped to the top of that list. I'll tell you what. I mean, we've had gas-powered scooter in there. We've had maybe a CT90, possibly something in that. But now, EV Goat for sure.
Goat. Mm-hmm.
I mean, no question. Well, God bless them over there at Kawasaki. I wonder if they'll offer it in a 2-stroke version.
I don't know the answer to that. Kawasaki is an amazing company. They make so many different things. I feel like they make musical instruments. Like you could buy a Kawasaki piano or maybe even a brass instrument.
I think so. I think so. I think they make like some power tools.
Yeah.
Like you can get a Kawasaki drill for some reason.
Yeah.
And you can get, of course, some great motorbikes. They make some fantastic motorcycles. And a bed, I think. You can get one of the toilet. They make the toilet seats. They make fancy like heating, cooling, light show, noise making, vibrating, massage toilet seats.
I guess I don't have one of those.
Oh, you got it. Well, you know what you're getting for Christmas.
They have handlebars?
Yeah, of course. Naturally. And they're shaped like a goat, which is interesting.
No.
So, you just sort of straddle and, it's great. It's, they've got a real
please stop describing that
disposition towards the goat. But, they are. They're a fabulous company and they've made I think they make yard equipment too, don't they? They make like mowers and stuff.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
Sounds right.
Well,
innovative.
There you go. Put down your pre-order for the Kawasaki Goat. We have no idea how much it costs, how far it goes, or how fast it goes, and we don't care. Absolutely want one.
Still want one.
Oh, yeah. We're going to warm that up for the... again, another thing, we've been looking for is the official Underpowered Our Corporate Car. And I think, again, EV Goat. We were sort of thinking one of the T-top Freelanders, one of the little pop-top Freelanders, but can't find one that runs. But this could be a hot contender, I think. Speaking of hot contenders, this week, long requested, we haven't done a tip-top tool tip in a long time. We've been busy with, so many other things.
It's time.
We got 3, I think, we got 1 really good one and 2 questionable ones. But Speedy-Sleeves was something that we were talking about the other day. Like, what in God's name is a Speedy Sleeve for those folks who don't know? Because I think a lot of people probably aren't familiar with them. But once you know, like the goddamn handiest thing in the world.
Well, when a man really loves a woman,
I see.
No, that's something different.
That's a different, but doesn't have a ton of time.
So a Speedy Sleeve is a thin metal cylinder that fits very tightly on the outside of a sealing surface to repair it. So what frequently happens with a seal is it will start leaking and somebody will replace the seal, and without realizing it, they have ignored the surface on which the seal rides, and it still leaks. So this product is a very thin, usually stainless steel sleeve that fits over a sealing surface. So like a shaft is a common surface against which the seals, or a spindle, something like that.
Yeah.
And it's used to repair that groove in the sealing surface without machine work. So you press this on, and the seal then rides on this thin stainless sleeve instead of the original material. And that allows you to continue using it and doing no machine work, or it avoids having to replace the part entirely to restore that surface on which a seal rides. So these, they're not typically inexpensive. They're usually between $40 and $70, maybe, depending on the size, of course. And they come in a pretty broad range of sizes. They're not terribly inexpensive. So sometimes it doesn't make sense economically. If the part is cheap, you might just consider replacing it instead of using a Speedy Sleeve. But in certain cases, the part is very difficult to replace or impossible to replace. And in those cases, the Speedy Sleeve makes a lot of sense. So we use Speedy Sleeves at the shop periodically to restore things like crank pulleys, or spindles or, various shafts that need to be sealed to keep fluids and lubricants inside of their reservoirs. But yeah, it's a super handy thing to know about. And the trick to getting a Speedy Sleeve that works well is to carefully measure that spindle or that shaft that you're working with so you get the appropriate sleeve. And there's a few different types of Speedy Sleeve, but typically it comes with an installation tool. So it comes with a little tool, and it basically, that's a cylinder that pushes against a flange so you can install the sleeve, and then the flange is perforated so it actually peels away, that metal flange. You just remove it. Now, the trick is sometimes that installation tool is not long enough to reach the sealing surface on a shaft that you might want to press it down, 10 inches onto a shaft, and the installation tool is like a cap with a center, and that might only be, 2 inches.
Yeah.
And so then you have to get a little creative with how you're going to get that Speedy Sleeve in the location where the seal rides. But usually when you look at a sealing surface, you can see, does it have a groove? You can run your finger over it. If your fingernail catches on that groove, it definitely isn't going to seal.
Yeah.
So that'd be an instance where you could use a Speedy Sleeve. How about you, Steven? You use these a lot?
Yeah, I mean, it came up in a drive flange that was particularly difficult to find, the front-facing output drive flange of the LT95. Those were pretty tricky. I did end up finding one and just replaced it because it had been bouncing around inside of a very loose, unfortunately, at some point that one mating bolt had come loose, and it had been bouncing around inside of its seal for quite some time, and so it was just beaten to shit. And save finally finding one over in the UK. That was a real alternative. And like you said, it's almost never worth it on like differential drive flanges and things like that, because they're cheaper than the Speedy Sleeve would be to put on in many cases. But if you wanted to keep an original, for the Defenders now, they don't make the original ones anymore. They're very expensive, very hard to find, and the new ones, some people don't like those. They're a single part instead of a two part, and so that would be an opportunity to use something like that. But it is a tricky but a really cool thing. It's like something that a lot of people don't know about, and so many people you see online have replaced the seal in somewhere and then immediately complain that, well, I replaced it, but now it's still leaking. What's going on? And
sure.
Without looking at that mating surface, it's a bummer when you spend all day ripping the differential apart in your Land Rover to put it back together and find the exact same puddle of oil when you come out the next day. That's it's an annoying feature. So I personally always swap out the drive flanges when I replace those seals, because in most cases they're cheap enough to just toss them out and get a new one. And I actually personally think the one-piece drive flanges for the TD3 TD or the 300 TDI rather axles are actually better than the two-piece, than that little thrust member. But that's just me. Another fancy little tool tip that I found the other day, Ike, and I don't know if you're familiar, but companies like Ryobi make just a million different shitty single-use tools. And for those who are huge Ryobi fans, try any other tool and you'll be a fan of it. I mean, you've obviously never tried anything else, but they make a couple cool little things. Now, I, for better or worse, am a DeWalt person. I have all DeWalt electric shit. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm saying they're all pretty bad, and it's the one that I have. So I have a ton of those DeWalt, 20-volt lithium batteries, and sometimes there is a tool that I would really like to use, and it's a Makita or it's a Ryobi or it's something like that. And only recently, and I'm sure maybe everybody else in the world knows this, but for the other person who didn't realize that, you can go onto Amazon and you can get battery adapters for basically anything to anything. So if you've always wanted that Ryobi $30 tire inflator gun or something, you can, in fact, get adapters from basically any set of batteries to any set of tools. And they're pretty inexpensive, $20-$30, and it lets you use, the electric ratchet or the something that you really want with your preferred system. What do you guys use over there at the old Pangolin 4x4? All steam power, I believe, right?
That's right, Stephen. It is entirely external combustion engine powered hand tools.
Yeah, hand tools. Yeah, tiny little steam engines on the back of an Ugga Dugga. It is quite the operation over there.
I think we might have a few Milwaukee ones too.
Yeah, you're gonna have that. I mean, it's one of those things. You pick one when you first start off because, in my case, there were some particular DeWalt tools that I happen to like their form factor, and now I've got all those batteries, so I'm never going. But now, hey, you can have whatever you want. Now, you just have to be careful because there's a lot of battery sensing tech in the tool that tells it not to completely discharge the battery to complete ruin, which if you adapt it to something else, it is very likely that tool could ruin those batteries. So just don't run the batteries completely dead because you can wreck the batteries doing that. But otherwise, you know what? It's a pretty handy way to get access to one of those tools without having to buy into a bunch more batteries and have a different battery charger and then find a place to plug it in and all of that sort of garbage. So I'm a big fan. Now, last tool tip today, Ike. I know this is something that you struggle with. A seal puller. Sometimes dangling a raw fish in front of a seal will work, and they'll sometimes chase that down. You can get them out of, if they're in the upstairs bathroom and you just need to get them out onto the lawn or something, that'll sometimes work.
This is a terrible joke.
Yeah. But again, you can tell I've been working on differentials because pulling seals out of things, especially if there's a shaft running down the middle of wherever it is that you're trying to pull seals out. What do you use for pulling seals? What do you like? What do you like to pull a seal with?
I have a set of Mayhew pry bars that I use for pulling seals out of various diameters and shapes, and usually that will do the trick. Occasionally, you get a really stubborn one, and you've got to use a more specialty tool like a slide hammer or something like that to pull the seal out with a hook. We have a snap-on slide hammer that's got a little tooth. Put that in there and kind of work your way around the seal, and that'll definitely pull it out if it's a stubborn one. But typically, I just use a pry bar for
just a pry bar. Yeah, I have a little. It's the best way I can describe it is it's a slightly bent screwdriver shaft with a little articulated hook thing on the end that lets you sort of put the elbow, if you will, of the tool against some hard surface around the outside of the thing, and then just get the little hook hand in behind it and just kind of pop it a little bit. And especially in a place where you've got, again, for instance, because I just changed out the drive member of the front side of the LT95, the drive flange, you've got, a piece of chassis running through there. You've got exhaust parts running through there. It's a jungle gym of shit around there. So you've really only got one little angle that you can get a little tool in. And so I found that to be useful.
What's the brand of that seal puller?
It is a one that I have found on eBay, and if you look on, strangely enough, you look on
eBay brand.
It's eBay brand, generic hooked seal puller. I'll put a link. I'll put a link down in the show notes, or we'll
so
post
helpful.
on Instagram. Yeah, I know, it's super helpful.
Look on eBay.
See if you can just Google seal puller, and by my incredibly vague description, good luck finding one. If you find it, we'll throw it up there on the old Instagram. As again, it's like the most generic thing. But I have to say, every once in a while, it's real handy to have. You know which one I don't like is those seal pullers that have they're like the metal flat hook one. Mm-hmm. That just destroy every surface that they touch, either the one that you're prying against, the seal itself, the sealing surface, it just mangles and destroys everything that it touches. I remember early on, somebody's like, "Oh, you got to get one of those to get those seals out," and I'm like, "It's just the worst." And you can see if it's been replaced before, if somebody has used one of those, because there's 1,000 little.
It's like an ice axe for lemurs. Those little things.
It is. It's like a tiny little ice axe. You can kind of, and that's probably a better use for it than trying to get a seal out of us.
I think so too.
Yeah, they just destroy things. So, a controversial let's say at the very least, controversial segment. And we'll loop around to why at the end of this episode. But a controversial segment that is one of fast becoming, I think, my favorite, and I think a lot of other people's favorite, imitation Land Rovers, or imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. This week we have an imitation Land Rover, the Nissan Patrol. Which there's the Nissan Patrol Club of North America just like gasp. Why they're all listening to the show, I don't know. It's a Land Rover centric show. What do you expect that we're going to say?
It's true.
But Ike, why is the Nissan Patrol an imitation Land Rover?
Well, the first generation Nissan Patrol, the G series Nissan Patrol definitely has a lot of Land Rover influence, and certainly it is not the only Nissan product with a lot of British influence. You look at the Nissan Fairlady Roadster and you're like, you know what? That's a lot like a British Roadster. And the Nissan Patrol G Series trucks are similar in that way. They definitely have a lot of Land Rover design features. Now, the front end of the Nissan Patrol sort of looks like a mix between a Toyota Land Cruiser and a Land Rover.
Yeah.
But where it starts to get really definitive is that hip line that the Land Rover has, that the Series 2 Land Rover came out with in 1958. The Nissan Patrol has that same design feature, the classic Land Rover hips, if you will. And the Patrol has that same design element.
And from like the late 60s, early 70s, right? That came quite a ways after the 2A.
I think it's like middle 60s.
Middle 60s,
the G Series Patrols came out. And I could be wrong on the exact date when those first came out, but definitely.
Well, don't worry.
Series
the Nissan Patrol Club of North America will let us know.
They'll remind us, I'm sure. Right. But the similarities don't stop there. When you look at the Patrol, the overall shape and the overall size, the overall dimensions are very similar to the short wheelbase Land Rover. And then you've got a rear cross member that's very Land Rover-esque. It's tapered towards the corners. The earlier ones have a rear PTO hole, just like the Land Rover. So they have a lot of similarities in the design features on the Patrol. Where it really starts to get uncanny, though, is in the interior. So the dashboard of the Nissan Patrol, if you look at it, the shape of the dashboard, shape of the firewall, the layout is very similar. Instead of having centrally mounted gauges, though, they have gauges in front of the driver. But as far as the way they look, the pressings that they use for the dash panel, all really similar. The position of the heater, the vents, how the vents are laid out on the Patrol, those are all really similar. If you sat in a Nissan Patrol of that period, you might think that you're in like a late 2A sort of feeling vehicle.
Sure. All steel dash, the seats are very simple, square pads with a back.
Parcel tray.
It all feels reminiscent. Now, one thing that the Patrols have that the Land Rover, of course, doesn't is 3 windshield wipers, which I think is a nice feature. The middle one for that middle passenger to be able to get, instead of making 2 reasonably sized useful windshield wipers, instead it has 3 tiny nonsensical windshield wipers from the top, which I think is a nice feature. I've never actually been in one in the rain. I've only ever been around a couple of them, period, and it was a fairly nice day. But yeah, they're much smaller than they look. I think because they look so much like a Land Cruiser as well. You look at pictures of them and you think like, oh, this is like the size of a Land Cruiser, but it's quite a bit smaller. They're a little guy.
It's a compact truck. A lot of them at that period were similar sized, but certainly they looked at a Land Rover when they designed this, and they were like, oh, we can make a few changes, but
this doesn't have enough windshield wipers. We could easily get one more windshield wiper in there.
Yeah, the steering wheel looks really similar. The bulkhead itself.
The roof is super similar. The hardtop, especially, like the shape and size of the window, the curve of the top of the roof, even the fact that the top of the roof was painted white, which is not a totally specific Land Rover thing, but certainly it is. It's got lots of. Although it did have cranked down windows, from what I remember. in some.
Yeah, they do have a crankdown window, which didn't come out into the Land Rover until the Defender in the 80s. So maybe that's an improvement. But certainly the shape of the door and the hip line and the door all is very Land Rover-esque. Now, the Patrol made some improvements over the Land Rover. The engine is a 6-cylinder, and at one time it was the most powerful compact SUV you could buy. I think it had 155 horsepower, which was more than the Land Cruiser's 135, and certainly more than the Land Rover's 77 horsepower.
77,
yeah, so that was a big improvement, but the transmission really was a little bit of a letdown. The 3-speed transmission was didn't really have low enough gears for what you would want off road, and the 3 speeds is one less than 4, so you just didn't have the gearing range that you have in a Land Rover. So that was one thing that maybe wasn't as nice, but certainly well constructed, the Patrols, and I believe they're still making a version of the Patrol, and the axles on the new ones are incredibly strong, I've heard, and they don't sell them here in this
course
market.
they call there is a new Nissan Patrol, which is like a modern SUV. They borrow that name, but I believe there's a utility version of that car that is still available in foreign markets, but. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I want one as badly as I want like many other Jimny. Yeah, a Gypsy. Ooh, controversial.
Jimny.
Oh, I want a Jimny so bad. I can't tell you. I don't want a Gypsy at all.
They're selling them at Texas dealerships around the border.
I have read a couple of articles about picking up a Jimny on the border, and it's just questionable legality there. But I don't know. I'd be up for it.
Wouldn't be the first thing that you've done that was questionable legality.
Not the last. It won't even be. I mean, it barely scratches the surface, of the. Anyways, but yeah. I mean, famously, I want a Jimny more than I should.
Do you want it more or less than the Kawasaki Rideable Goat?
Oh, I don't know. It's a tough race. I mean, I don't know. I refuse to choose. If I have to choose, it's not worth living.
It's time for Land Rover Book Club.
The Land Rover Book Club. So, you have you've brought a book to Land Rover Book Club this week. Great one. And one of my favorite Land Rover oriented book names, Too Long in the Bush. By Len Bedell.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, Len Bedell is an Australian engineer who is responsible for the survey and construction of many of the roads across the Australian outback. And he wrote a series of books, and one of them is called Too Long in the Bush. But
and that's a personal grooming guide, from what I understand, right?
Unfortunately, it is not. Sorry to disappoint you. But it chronicles his travels and some of his projects in constructing these roads across the outback. And he's kind of a Australian folk hero, super smart guy, did a lot of navigation by the stars. He's out there with an astrolabe, and he's got his Land Rover, and he's taking, observations of the stars to try and, get these roads straight and to, take a heading and follow that. So, sort of the gist of a lot of the books is, he's driving around in a Land Rover, and he's finding interesting things out in the Australian outback, Aboriginal peoples and, various animals and neat natural features. And really is fascinating sort of hearing his descriptions of encountering these as a Western person for the first time, and, becoming he's clearly in love with his country. He just loves that place and wants to tell everybody about it, and it really comes through in the writing. But it's super fascinating, and his vehicle that he drives around in the books is a Land Rover.
Yeah,
and so he's riding out ahead of the construction crew, and he's making the route. So he's finding the route and marking it so they can, go from one point to the next with the construction of these roads. But super fascinating. He's got a bulldozer. Mm-hmm. He's got a grader blade, a water truck or a water trailer. I can't remember. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's a trailer. And then like a bunkhouse, sort of a travel trailer.
A rolling bunkhouse, yeah.
Yeah, and then the Land Rover. And that's all they have to, make these roads. And there's 4 guys or something. And at one point, they accidentally set their bunkhouse on fire. No. So they're like all sleeping outside. And they have water. And then I think at one point the grader blade breaks down. And so they can't really continue with the road building process. So they have to like tow it all back to, you know, wherever they came from. And it's like 2,000 miles and the bulldozer goes like 3 miles an hour. So they're just like towing it back over a span of like months. Or it feels like that. And then Len's just driving around in his Land Rover, just seeing stuff. You know, and it's pretty fascinating, pretty neat.
Is there any indication of where that Land Rover is? Has it been lost to the ages? Is it in a museum somewhere like the Bush Tucker one? Or
I'm sure there is some discussion of Len's Land Rovers because he didn't just have one. You know, he did this over a career. You know, I think he started out with a Series 1 and then did some Series 2s and 2As. But you know, I think maybe one or two of them are still existent, and then the others are lost. But there's actually plaques, you know, on some of these roads, like Gun Barrel Highway, I think is one of them that he worked on. There's plaques, you know, that talk about him and are sort of a homage to his efforts in constructing these roads. But he's, like I said, sort of an Australian folk hero, you know, especially among Land Rover enthusiasts. But I think his books are valuable and interesting beyond that, you know, for their content.
Yeah, well, we'll add that to the official Land Rover Underpowered Hour Book Club. And,
check it out if you get a chance.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a read. You can get all of it. I think there's a few of them that are Kindle that are available on the Kindle, but most of them, if not all of them, I'm sure are available through Amazon. So definitely worth picking those up. So Ike, a whole new segment here on the show, which we like to invent segments and then never revisit them. I think this one, we'll be back to frequently. This is a new segment we're calling Responding to the Comments. So every week we publish information on ye old internet, both to Facebook, Instagram, and on our YouTube channel. And all of those platforms allow you to comment. And we like to cherry pick a few great comments every week, and we'll respond to those. So first comment up from John Carroll. I'm not sure if it's the John Carroll of the Land Rover magazine fame, in which case is an interesting comment. But Ike, John Carroll's comment is, are you seriously suggesting that the Austin Gypsy is an imitation Land Rover?
Yeah, and I want to respond to that fully. Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
100%. Yeah, it's definitely a copy of the Land Rover. I mean, it looks like it bears more than a passing resemblance to a Land Rover. It has virtually all the same features. There are some differences with respect to the, suspension, a few other things, but generally speaking, it's about as close of a copy of any vehicle that there ever was. It's so similar. I mean, I think I have more people that mistake Austin Gypsies for Land Rovers and then tell me there's a Land Rover, sitting in a field somewhere and only for it to turn out to be an Austin Gypsy. And those people are, maybe not experts, but they're certainly automotive enthusiasts, and they're mistaking these Gypsies for Land Rovers. And I don't think that's uncommon. It's definitely looks a lot like a Land Rover.
It's an honest mistake, John Carroll, maybe of Land Rover magazine fame.
For the rest of our listeners, you be the judge. You check out some pictures of some Austin Gypsies and tell us what you think. Is it a copy or is it not a copy?
You know what? We'll set up an Instagram contest just to infuriate John Carroll, maybe of Land Rover magazine, and we'll just see. We'll see how far we can take this. So another comment. Our good friend Gunnar Miller, who is a frequent commenter on our Facebook posts, says, "I think the reason that the Stretch Series 1 in Never So Few, the famous Steve McQueen film, was that they were trying to replicate a Japanese World War II vehicle."
I am not familiar with a Japanese World War II vehicle that looks like that, but in the space of Hollywood, I'm sure that may have been the case. But if
especially at that time, possibly,
especially at that time,
it does have a rising sun flag on the fender, so it is possible that they were trying to do that.
Yeah, but I don't know. I guess I don't know if it's a specific one they were trying to emulate. Right. But if you've seen that film and you know what that vehicle might have looked like, let us know.
Drop a comment, and then you may be the future subject of responding to the comments. Well, like that wraps up another rousing discussion of Land Rovers and EV goats on this very special episode of the Underpowered EV Goat Hour. We have some super fantastic guests coming up in the next few weeks. We've got some really fun stuff coming up there. We finally, and we've been saying this every week for weeks, and we're just going to keep doing it. We finally are on the precipice of new merch on the Underpowered Hour store. Some super amazing art, be cool. As stickers, as t-shirts, potentially as men's and ladies' undergarments, marital-aids, yeah, whatever. Again, too long in the bush in that case. We've got it all. We've got it all. Whatever you're looking for. Unfortunately, because of the length of time we've spent in the bush this episode, we have run out of time for Ike's review of Nando's, so that will have to wait for a future episode. Unfortunately, but we'll get there one of these days.
It'll happen.
They've been patiently waiting, actually, on hold every episode since we started to offer any additional information that we might want about Nando's. So one of these days, we're going to take them out of the guest lounge and we'll get them on the show. So
we'll do it.
We're looking forward to that. And Ike, that's it for us this week. So as always, good luck out there, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thanks, Stephen. See you soon.